Welcome to my VMware's vSphere 6 Lab 24. Here we're dealing with permissions. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to get into my C client. You can also do this from your web client, just kind of depends on how you want to do it. But first thing I want to do is I want to hop over to my domain controller, because I want to simulate what happens when I create a new user. I have a new technician that's starting. I want him to manage vSphere, so I want him to be able to access everything. So I'm gonna create a new user. I'm gonna call this user vUser. For my example, I'm not gonna have the password expire. Though normally that's a good idea. I'm also not gonna make them change it next login, because again I want this password set for them. So we have this new user called vUser. So I'm going to try to log in to my web client using it. vita/vUser. And it may let me in, but it may not show me anything. No inventory, no nothing. That's because this user doesn't have permissions to do anything. So I'm actually going to log out. And I'm going to do is configure his permissions on the C client. So I'm going to go to roles. Here are the predefined roles. We can actually create custom roles and whatnot, but actually I don't want to do that quite yet. I actually want to set permissions on my domain. So I'm going to click on my top VC. I'm going to go to permissions, and here are the appropriate users that have all their permissions. Well, that's not quite exactly what I want. So I'm actually going to move away from my desktop client. I'm going to log in to my web client. While they may both do the same thing, sometimes it's not always the same items. Hosts and clusters. Again, I'm clicking on my top level VC. I'm going to permission. Notice here I have the ability to add a user. In the desktop client, I don't. I'm going to go ahead and select my Vita domain. I'm going to find my vUser. Make sure he's down here. Click OK. Now my vUser is an administrator. But what happens if I don't want to do that? Maybe I want to set his permissions to read-only instead. I want to propagate it to all sub-objects. I'm going to click OK. I should now be able to log in, but I should not be able to do anything. vita/vUser, our classroom password. Notice his role type is read-only. So he can see things, but he can't make any changes. Well, I don't want that. I want to be able to create a user and predefine or specifically define rules or permissions that I want him to use. So I'm going to sign back out of my vUser. I'm going to log back in, but this time I'm going to go ahead and create a few new roles. So I'm going to go to Administration. I'm going to go down to Roles. Here are the current roles that are here. I should get an add button, but it's not popping up, so I'm actually going to log out. And I'm actually going to log back in as my built-in administrator. Even though they're both administrators, even though they both have the appropriate permissions, sometimes it gets a little bit weird. Okay, notice here I have the permissions now. So I'm going to add it. I want to call this Template Deployer. I don't want to give him all permissions. I want to, under Data Store, give him the allocate space. Under Network, I want to assign Network. Under Resource, I want to assign VMs to a resource pool. And lastly, under Virtual Machine, under Configuration, I want to add new disk. I want to add or remove devices. And I want to be able to manipulate memory. Underneath Interaction, I want everything. Lastly, not lastly, but next, Inventory. I want to create it from existing. Lastly will be provisioning. I want to be allowed to deploy templates, read customization, and the ability to customize. Click OK. And now I have a new a new role called Deployer. We can always edit them if we need to at a later date. Alright, so we're assigned our vUser read-only permissions. So now we're going to manipulate it so he's going to take a new role, our newly created role. So let's go Home. Let's go Hosts and Clusters. Sorry. VMs and Templates. We want to go ahead and click on our data center. We want a new folder, which should be for templates. We're going to call this one temp VMs. Now that it's there, we're going to go home. Oh, actually take that back before we go that far. Let's go ahead, go to temp VMs, go to manage. Here you'll see the appropriate users that can manage them. So you can see the appropriate RV user still has read only. So let's go home, hosts and clusters. We're clicking on our very top VC. Here we still have read only, so we're going to go ahead and edit that. It is getting its permissions from what's above it. So we actually need to do the permissions on the very top on our VC. Here we have our appropriate user. Let's go ahead and edit our user. Here again it shows read only. We should be able to assign them our new role, but for some reason it's not popping up just yet. So interesting, we actually cannot change the role. It doesn't propagate. Oh, now it does. Before it actually wasn't loading the slide bar. We're going to change this user to a deployer. And again, it'll propagate to its children. Now, we should be able to log off. And log in as them. One. So now we have some we should be able to now see things, and we should be able to now edit things. So now let's go ahead and go. I'm going to do this actually through the desktop client. I'm going to go home. I'm going to go VMs and templates. I actually want to deploy it for a machine from this template. I'm going to call it E732 Delta. I'm going to be putting it in temp VMs. I'm going to be putting ASXi1. I'm going to be putting it in iSCSI2. Alright, it does not like that at all. On one. Okay, let's try that one more time. I actually had to go in and I added another data store just because I had no space. So VM and templates, we will deploy machine, we'll put it in temp, we'll call this E732 Delta on ESXi1. I'm getting an error because I don't have the appropriate ISO. That's fine. We're going to be storing it on the data store. We are actually going to use a pre-existing customization, and we're going to power it on after it's created. I'm going to select my answer file that I've created before, and that should all be good. Click finish, let my VM go ahead and deploy it. while it's doing that, I'm going to go back to hosts and clusters. And I can see it prepping out my machine. Even though I'm logged in as vUser. Just going to let it take its time to clone out the template and be patient. Okay, it took a little while, but it did deploy my new machine and it went ahead and powered it on. I'm going to open up and yep, there it is. It's setting up my vNetwork, it's setting up all of my files. I'm going to go ahead and shut it down because I don't need it on. And that is this lab in a nutshell. I want to thank you.